Hi, I'm Lori Eaton, and I'm here with Nico Burney of Compass Intelligence. Today, Nico is going to walk you through the decision assist logic and the foundation behind it. Then I'll take you through a short demo of how the logic can be implemented.
Thanks, Lori. That was great. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to walk you through this logic and give you some context behind the philosophy of how we built the tool. And then you actually see an example of that in action. So let's go through this. So Lori and I have worked on this project very closely together. And there's basically 4 parts of the logic that we'll walk you through, which is how we profile customers, how we assign them their bandwidth requirements, how we talk to them about whether they need voice solutions in the context of a bundle, and then how do we meet their special needs or requirements through value-added services. So to give you a basic overview of the Decision Assistant tool, which is a customer-facing web experience, what we describe here and what we've spent work on with CTAM is to actually define the logic behind the tool. And the purpose of this particular project is to give that foundational logic to MSOs that like to build their own online tool which could face the customer. And the demo that we're going to share today is really just an example of that. It's not necessarily meant to be something that MSOs could take and package up right out of the box to share with customers. Okay, so the decision assistant works in 4 simple steps. And the philosophy behind it is to really focus on identifying the customer's needs and activities, and from that, recommending one set of services that will meet those needs. And this is actually the reverse of what the industry does today. What the industry does today is we list out all of our available products and services and put the onus on the customer to choose from that listing and determine which of those products and services best meet their needs. The decision assistant is meant to turn it around and meant to behave almost like a direct salesperson, which wants to get to know the customer and in 4 simple steps and really tell the customer what might best serve their needs without exposing them to all of the options. So the philosophy is very simple, and it's built around kind of 4 simple questions, which is tell me about your business. And we ask things about, their demographics, what kind of industry they're in. We qualify them to see if they're in the correct footprint or regional market, and so on. The next step is, once you know a little bit about the kind of business they're in, then we ask them to tell us about their business activities. And that's really around their common activities and some certain special needs that they might have. Then we ask them to tell us about their office, such as do they have a lobby or not, do they have a receptionist or not, and those things have a great bearing on the kind of phone services they might require. And then the last bit would be, do they have special needs as a business, such as compliance requirements or high-end security needs or what have you. So we combined the answers for all 4 of these types of questions and have logic associated with each type of answer. So if depending on a customer's industry or depending on the kind of office they may be in, the decision assistant will associate that with a particular service that an MSO provides. Where we are with this foundational tool is we don't recommend specific services for customers because this is the basis. But in the work that we've done with other MSOs like Charter, for example, we take the tool all the way to its end where we actually select specific Charter services and recommend those to the customer based on how they answer these 4 sets of questions. Okay, so let's walk you through the discovery process. How would it work fundamentally? So it's really a multi-step process. So the first step, the vision of how the tool might actually work in an online experience is that there would be some point of entry in the MSO's website. And the first part of that, the customer would basically answer a few questions about their business, their industry, how many employees, how many types of devices or gadgets they have in the business and such. And then it would start to ask them about their common activities. So what do they do and what kinds of things are they doing those activities with? Then it asks them to tell us about their office setup and their phone requirements, their special requirements. And from that, it actually recommends the following things. 1 internet speed, 1 voice plan, if voice is something that would be a common requirement for them, 1 set of calling features if that's also appropriate, 1 set of value-added services, and it would recommend that they get business TV services or not. So it really, does exactly what a salesperson, is meant to do in the most simplest form, which is understand what the customer's needs are and then recommend exactly what your business can offer them. So, this slide basically shows you, what we believe might be those 6 very important profiling questions to ask and, give some direction in terms of what that might mean. You'll find that as I go through this deck that there's going to be more details on the logic. For example, some things around phone services associated with industry or value-added services that are associated with industry. For the most part, we think in execution, things like how many employees and what kinds of technologies they use are going to be probably 2 of the most important, profiling questions to ask beyond, determining if they're within your footprint or not. So that takes us to the next step, which is to understand their common activities and the types of devices that they use in the business. Because of course, right, these are going to be things that are going to be considered drivers of bandwidth and, more advanced requirements. So our logic around this is to give actually a really long list of options for customers to choose from, and you'll see that in the coming slides. But that we group those things into, 1 of 3 categories. If they're sort of low bandwidth applications such as email or just basic web surfing, if they're medium bandwidth applications, so things like IP video calling or remote access, or if they're really high bandwidth applications. And depending on how many of each of these things a particular customer may choose, it will then map that back to a particular bandwidth requirement. Do they need more? Do they need less? And in the case of the MSOs that we're working with, we actually recommend a specific speed of internet connectivity based on how many choices that a particular customer might make. The other big determinant of that recommended internet speed has to do with how many devices will be connected to that connection. So is it laptops and PCs and tablets, mobile phones, and so on. And also, if they have an IP phone system, that will also have some implication on what we might recommend in terms of voice services. So that takes us to the 3rd step, which would be once we've understood about who they are and kind of what they do, then we ask them really basic questions about how they communicate with customers, and this is really about phone services. Very simple, do they need toll-free services? Do they have a receptionist or a live operator? Do they have a physical location where customers may come from, and then what's the radius of their calling? And just by answering these simple questions, then we can really determine a lot about what kind of plans to recommend to them and what kind of voice bundles that a provider might have to meet those particular needs. And then the last step in profiling customers and being able to assist their decision process would be to understand about any special business requirements or needs. So do they have data security needs or email compliance, e-commerce desires? Do they have a lot of data storage requirements or credit card processing, virtual workers, and so on? This list of questions, it will be highly correlated with the actual set of value-added services that a particular MSO may have. If we take a company like Charter that has actually a fairly broad set of value-added services, whether it be static versus dynamic IP addresses, desktop security services, hosted Microsoft Exchange, things like that, as well as managed routers. They actually have a pretty diverse set of value-added services, so we probably have several questions there to profile customers to recommend those services. For other MSOs that may have only 1 or 2 value-added services, we might actually combine these types of questions into their common activities to make the decision assistant process even more simple for the particular customer. So as you can tell, the whole logic behind this is really meant to be able to be customized specifically for the suite of products in a particular MSO's portfolio and to create a very relevant experience for the customer to recommend exactly what that MSO may be able to offer their business based on their needs. Okay, so the next few slides are actually going to show you what the actual logic would look like based on what we've learned in the research that we've conducted working with CTAM and other research we've conducted. So as you can see here, we've got this fairly long list of activities that a customer could say that their business engages in a regular basis. And on the logic side, which would be how your developers would program this into a tool and how we've created in this demo, you will see that some applications are coded as low bandwidth, others are categorized as medium, and others are high. And then you'll also see some things on this common activities list that are really associated with phone services. And as I mentioned previously, we could add to the list things that might be activities that might be associated with value-added services. So it really would depend on the suite of products from that particular MSO. So if we were to give an example of some of the logic that we used for Charter for their particular business, their sweet spot, the guidance that we were given is that, their sweet spot or their preferred, service to position to this particular market is their Essentials 30 product. So as you can see, this is the most common recommendation that we make versus, the Pro 50 and the Pro 100 products. And the goal here would be, it's very simple. Depending on how many options in a particular category, low, medium, or high, that a customer chooses, and based on how many devices they indicate they have in their business, and those devices could include everything from PCs to cell phones and so on, then we make a recommendation about which internet speed they need. So it's pretty straightforward logic on the back end of the decision assistant tool. And, so we go further with regard to logic around which phone services are recommended, and once they get into the bit, to ask them about what kind of an office they have, and, whether they get offered, recommended things like toll-free or long distance. And then the value-added services part is once again not only just in the common activities, but also in the special needs, as well as in questions we ask in the first step, the profiling questions. And this is how this logic can be very customizable and very powerful for an MSO, in that, as we collect information about a particular customer at each stage of the profiling process, it makes us more able to recommend more sophisticated services for them. So things like static IP address or an extra dynamic IP address, all these kinds of things, we can really tailor this specifically for the portfolio of services that your company may have to offer. And the last piece would be around the industry tag. So depending on what industry a company is in, we've made some recommendations in terms of what to always recommend, regardless of what they've said about their phone needs. Just because of the nature of their industry, then they probably will need these kinds of services. And they may already have a solution for it, but it would be helpful to expose them to other alternatives that your company could provide. And the same is true for value-added services. So if they punch a particular vertical, then they might actually see a value-added service or something like TV, even though that customer may not have said that they have a need or have answered the question in such a way as to say they need that particular service. And that is it. So that takes us to the demo part of this tool, and Lori is actually going to walk you through an example of an online tool that we've created, very simple, that uses the fundamentals of this logic. So I'm actually going to turn the screen over to Lori and make her presenter.
Okay, so this tool is an example of how the logic that Nico just talked about could be used. As you can see, there are multiple paths that allow the tool user to select what interests them based on their bandwidth and phone needs. On this screen, the user can select multiple options. So I'm going to select, see if we have enough bandwidth, and see if we can lower our costs. On this screen, we're asking them to select which goal interests them most from the path they previously selected. In this case, I'm going to take you all through the path which helps them to decide if they have enough bandwidth. The first set of questions revolves around capturing information on the demographics of their company. I'm going to just kind of click through these, but understand that each of the answers for each question the tool is weighted, which will ultimately lead to one of three possible bandwidth recommendations. Either they need more bandwidth, they have enough bandwidth, or they have too much bandwidth. And this is running really slow. I apologize. Let's click through these. What kind of industry are they in? How many commercial locations do they have? Which of the following capabilities they use?
This is great, Lori.
How many handsets? Remote workers. So this next set of questions, the second part of the questionnaire, focuses on who and how they currently use the internet, and next is kind of a needs assessment for common internet activities that they may want to add. Okay. So what kind of internet activities are currently or will you want to use? How many people will share the connection? Kinds of devices. Current upload speed.
And now this gets us to the recommendation.
So in this case, based on how I responded to each question, the tool is recommending that I need more bandwidth. We've put in a link here which will take us out of the tool and potentially to an MSO's website where they could actually show recommendations that would meet this need. And
right.
As Nico used the charter example before, I also put in a link to the charter, to a charter tool here.
Right. But just to, thank you. That was great, Lori. Thank you very much. But just to make sure that we're clear, the demo that Lori just walked you through is really meant to just show, the MSOs how the tool could work online and how quickly that a user could go through it. So that was about 2 to 3 minutes, even with some slight delays. So it's not actually, the number of questions that we ask is actually it's not meant to take longer than, say, 4 to 5 minutes for everything from entering the tool, answering all the questions, and then getting, a recommendation. And so that's actually quite a fair amount of time for a user to spend on your site, but it would actually be what we believe would be a user that's going to be well qualified, and they're probably going to have come to your site more than once before, and when they enter such a tool is because they're very serious about making a buying decision. So yeah, so I hope that this is really useful for you guys, and we look forward to working with you guys like we've worked with Charter, and to help you customize this tool for your website. Thank you very much. Say thank you, Lori, because you've been great too.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.